we might want to start it in the spring.
Oh, it's good to
Anyway,
see.
all right, Councilwoman Lucchese, let me know she's probably going to be late to this meeting or not be able to make it. So she said, please start with that. So with that in mind, are we ready to go, Wendy? Thank you. The Zoom is working though?
It should be working.
Well, with that in mind, I'll call the meeting of the Dunsmuir City Council to order at 6 p.m. September 1st. Could we all rise? City Manager, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving to a roll call.
Here.
Here. Here. Excused. Present. All right, tonight we have a special presentation and announcement regarding the Dunsmuir Railroad cleanup project.
That's kind of a combination of from my update. So last Monday, we toured the facility, the Union Pacific project for cleanup with all the different parties involved, EPA, California Fish and Wildlife, and we kind of got a good scope of what they're looking to do, how they're looking to ensure the shoreline, and kind of the timeline of the project. And so they are actively working to build their containment basin now in the south yard, and once that's complete, then we can start more of the restoration.
Yeah, and a couple takeaways. I know Councilman Keisler going for attendance as well, but Union Pacific has changed who's the leader within their own organization, which department is leading this effort. It went from just the regular mitigation team to the emergency response team. As far as we understand it, a pretty high executive was here to oversee the meeting that's started with taking over this project. So it should kick into gear. Regarding the public works shop, we were given at least the understanding that we would be free to use it for our snowplows through March of this coming year. So the horizons we're actually moving would be next year. It's not set in stone, but at least they were saying that.
Which is great. We're really great.
Then Jacobs Engineering is working on an incredible brake to keep the oil back. It'll be down to bedrock and a minimum of 8 feet wide, compacted sand all the way down. Quite interesting. Are there any questions?
Well, was there a reason given for changing the status to Great Rivers?
They just said internal management challenges is essentially how they sum it up.
What was it?
Internal management challenges?
Somebody screwed up.
Yeah.
On the railroad
On the
side,
railroad
or the
side.
contractor side, or the government?
On the railroad side.
They seem very pleased with their engineering firm, Jacobs Engineering. Our assessment was that they were most knowledgeable people on the grounds. I think it was ultimately a lack of progress based upon court order.
I think they felt that the project was going a little behind. They brought the hazmat team to expedite. Manage where the surely not job. Like how did
one thing that the mayor mentioned, I think it's important to understand why this is working now and you're confident to solve the problem, is that before this, they hadn't gone all the way down to the walls they put in place, and we've gone down so far major project, but I think that they hopefully have it right this time after decades.
Yeah, and to put it in context for you Pacific, because we know it's an important part of our town and this project is ongoing. This is tied to their largest remediation project in the front of East Texas in their entire railroad system. So this is a really big deal organization. I have no idea so we have such a work this week. Right. So on an important note though, California Fish and Wildlife was there and reiterated it was safe to eat fish. No negative flows contained in the fish and tested continuously, which is all good news. Currently, all the oil is actually being trapped. That of course is not good as removed. I believe the city was going to be reviewing their traffic. Let's move into general public comment for this evening. It's time for the constituents or friends to come up. We'll be allotted 3 minutes to comment on an item concerning the city's business that is not on the agenda. So any item generally, or any item that is on our consent agenda, which tonight consists of a check registry for the last 2 weeks, a public safety funds MOE, and a resolution extending the city's wastewater services to residential property located down South First Street, and a resolution of the City Council appointing representatives to SCORE Board of Directors, our insurance group with other cities. So if anyone has any public comments, please come up to the podium or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. You'll be allotted 3 minutes, and I will interrupt you for a 30-second warning so you're not entirely cut off. But please state your name and address for the record. Please state your name and address for the record.
So it's okay to speak, okay. Yeah. My name is Mark Juarez, 5744 Dunsmuir Avenue, Dunsmuir, California. I recognize a month ago, there was a decision made at this city council meeting concerning the California Theater. I was never alerted to the fact that such a decision was being made, or I could even attend such a meeting. It seems really unfair. The decision made was unanimous that it was to be a landmark. It was already clearly identified that there was no benefits in making it a landmark status. There were in fact much better solutions that would benefit the city far greater than making it a landmark. It was described by Blake. It was in the historical district. So any things that was said here at council for the rationale and reasons for making it a landmark were irrelevant and untrue. There was a petition signed by 444 people. Every single person that I talked to did not understand what they were signing. It was completely misrepresented. This was the deception that Peter Arth and Tim Holt are doing to the city. As I believe the landmark, unless you have an ulterior motive or something that you're again trying to deceive the city and take advantage of me as a landowner against my constitutional rights, there's no valid reason for doing this. There are better solutions. So I disagree with this. And I would like to understand what the rationale was in making it a landmark when it already sits in historical district and is considered a landmark as it is. There's no reasons to go into a further process.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. Appreciate your comment. Are there any additional public comments this evening? All right, seeing none, I will close the general public comment for this evening. And just in response, I'd refer Mr. Juarez to the meeting minutes. They're a matter of public record for clarification on why council chose to pursue the landmark status. So let's move into council and staff comments, and let's begin with our city manager.
Well, hello, everybody. It's my first official meeting. And so, as you can see, a light agenda, been basically just getting my nose dirty, trying to, in the books and trying to understand everything. It's not a lot to report, other than, I mean, we kind of talked about the rail yard and that stuff, but really it's just getting to know all the workers and everything. And,
You haven't figured it all out yet.
yeah, I got a few days under my belt so far, but yeah. So, no, I'm just excited to be here. So.
Thank you, and I do promise the rest of council, these light agendas are not going to be the norm going forward. Seems appropriate. Sergeant Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor Bryan. So I wanted to introduce Sergeant Scott Stock. He's my partner. When I'm on days, he's on nights. When I go to nights, he'll be on days. Excuse me, Dustin. So while I'll still be the point of contact, if we need an actual body right now, Sergeant Stock will be on during the days, started in October for 3 months. We take turns on day shift to night shift.
Quick question, how does that relate to what was prior to the case with you and Sergeant Christie?
Well, he was a lieutenant.
Lieutenant.
There's no difference. It's just, I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce Sergeant Stock. He's largely responsible when the cat's away, the mice will play. And he's on it, making sure that Dunsmuir's getting the patrol they deserve and need and what they're paying for. And the other thing, just of note, not much has been going on, thankfully. We did conduct a warrant sweep last Sunday. It only got to last half a day because calls began to come in, but we did effect an arrest on a domestic violence arrest warrant. Got that person arrested and off the streets for a few days, as long as the state of California allows. So that was a lot of fun for the deputies, and we are out there actively looking for people with arrest warrants. If you're listening and have one, please take care of it. They're a blast for us, so we'll be doing more.
Any questions of Dunsmuir's Police Chief?
Welcome to the party.
Thank you. Let's move into council comments. Councilman Earth, would you like to begin?
Well, yeah, of course. So, we haven't gotten to approval of the minutes yet, but I do think, especially given the comments of Mr. Juarez, that Resolution 2022-16 in the minutes, it hadn't been sent to Mr. Kenny yet for his final review, but I think it's very important that we finalize the process, that the resolution be as strong as it can be, that the city manager meet with Mr. Juarez and hand him a copy of the resolution and the package from the Planning Commission. This is a continuation of nobody listens to me. The city is working against my interests. And if Mark were here, I would challenge him for the 440 to 500 people that signed the petition. I haven't seen a single one get up and say, I was tricked, I was duped, I changed my mind. Not a single one. So this is going to be a development that carries on. Dunsmuir Live has pointed out that the 100-year anniversary of the theater will occur in 2026. And there's no secret agenda. There's a number of citizens that want the theater restored and open by 2026. And it's going to happen one way or another. What else? I think I'm going to save the rest for committee reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Keisler.
Somebody said there's not been a lot going on. Somebody's not walking my shoes. First thing I want to say is I want to apologize. I want to apologize to the city of Dunsmuir. I am so honorably grateful and thankful for our fire department, the Mount Shasta Fire Department, the McLeod Fire Department, the Weed Fire Department, the Castella Fire Department, CAL FIRE, and anybody else that might have been there. Most people know it was my car that caught fire. It was I have a Kia. Don't buy a Kia. I have a Kia, and I didn't know that there was a recall and there was a fire hazard if you run the hazard lights. My ex-wife had a flat tire. She was running the hazard lights. We went out, got the tire. Long story short, she went to storage unit to put a couple things in. The car was not running, it was parked, and it blew up. Turns out there's a series of sequence that if you run the hazard lights and then turn the signal and whatever, they go boom, boom. It went boom, boom. There was 15 storage loss, a lot of water damage, a lot of people lost a lot of things. One lady said to me, I've been paying on my mom. My mom passed away and I've been paying on her stuff for like 17 years. I just didn't want to get rid of it. I'm humbly saddened. I feel terrible about this. I have AAA, it's fully covered. I've been contacted by Kia who asked me, what can I do to make you happy? I said, tell the town of Dunsmuir it's gonna be okay, and to stop looking at me like I did something wrong. So, I wasn't there. This is an accident, and I'm really sorry. Everybody's okay, nobody got hurt, that's really all I care about. On another note, got a couple of things. Not a bit. I want to commend our new city manager. On his second or third day, there was something happened. A tree fell on a man's house and literally split this man's house in two. Me and him really haven't had any contact, welcome to the job and do your job. And I called him and I asked him if he would meet me and come out on a field trip. Something I think he needed to take a look at. Man was there in like 6 minutes. It's a problem. And I showed him. And it's being evaluated, situations, they're taking a look. But the point is, I called our city manager and he instantly came out to look at what he could do to help a fellow Dunsmuirian citizen that's having a problem. And I commend you for that, sir. It's been a while since I had one do that, and I really appreciate that. And that's what it's going to take for you to do a good job, is you got to come see it. They just can't tell you about it. I won't say what I said about the theater because they left. Welcome to the party, man. I know you're okay. Yo. My name is gentlemen. So, on the other note, Steampunk, it's going to be a great event. It's the 24th, 25th, September's coming up. It's going to be down here in the railroad yard now. We have a stage, a band. This one you're going to want to come out and see. So I really look forward to seeing everybody there. That's about all I got. Again, I just want to say, it was an accident. I'm sorry. And everybody's going to be okay in the long run. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Kaiser. Vice Mayor Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to follow up on what Dave was saying. And when I found out about the particular car, the particular model, I went online, and there are many videos of people just being parked, people driving down the road, and all of a sudden the Kia explodes. Had over 5,000 fires. 5,000 fires. And there's a $780 million class action lawsuit that was won. So this is a major problem, and for anyone that thinks that either Karen or Dave had anything to do with this other than making the mistake of buying a Kia, I just want you to know that's the case. And I know when Dave called, he was heartbroken. Karen not only lost the car, but she had all her medicine. She had her purse with $2,400 in it. She had her phone, everything. So everything in the storage that was lost, all of that. And so there's nothing other than the fact that there's a problem with the particular automobile that needs to be fixed. Mentioning on the steampunk, if people aren't aware, you got to get ahead of the game here, because the whole idea of steampunk is it's kind of a community getting together and having a Halloween where it's not about spooks and goblins, but about going back in time and imagining a place at never time it never existed. So if you go online and type in steampunk and look around, and particularly if you look at images, you can get ideas. But if you want to fully take advantage of this, you'll want to, get part and find out how to look like you were back in the Victorian era and doing something strange. The other thing is, following up on that, the Rotary will be having a pancake breakfast on Sunday morning, that Sunday morning, in the Catholic Church building.
From 8 to 10:30.
8 to 10:30. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Deutsch.
Hi, I apologize. I had to take my brother to the Medford airport and there's a lot of construction. And so I got here as soon as I can. So thank you for being patient. I really have nothing to update besides the item that's on the agenda.
I have no additional comments other than to reiterate that it is really wonderful to have the city manager on board, and appreciate your prompt communication. Let's move into committee reports. Were the committees that met during this time? Dunsmuir?
Well, we haven't met, but the Solid Waste Committee has an urgent need to meet because we have been focused in our last several meetings on green waste disposal. And so at this point, Clemens Disposal is ready to do 2 neighborhood pickup days for green waste in September, the 13th and the 20th. But we have to let the citizens, businesses, and residences know. And the idea now is a full-page flyer that Clemens will put right on the black cans to let people know what they can do, can't do. But this is bifurcated chipping and removal of wood chips. We have a chipper as the city of Dunsmuir, but apparently we're not ready to do it yet. So I contacted A Cut Above that obviously does a lot of business with the city and locals. And Tom from A Cut Above was supposed to get in touch with Blake to see if the other leg of this effort, which is to pick a Saturday, 4 to 6 hours in a central location in Dunsmuir, and you bring your green waste as defined, and A Cut Above will turn it into wood chips and dispose of it. And we have $5,000 in the budget to do that. So I don't know the state of things, but I'd love to be able to announce both events. September the 1st, we're getting close.
Yep.
But Clemens has thought it through as to how they're going to do it. And obviously it implicates where could we put the stuff? Well, we could put it at the airport. We could put it at this location. But that's out of my pay grade. So that's going to have to be a public works discussion.
And I think, not to get into a full discussion, we have our normally scheduled solid waste committee meeting next Monday, and Blake usually puts it together, but since he's out of town, I can send you some information that we've had from our previous ones. But we it's a holiday. It's a holiday. Do you want to move
And
it?
he's going to Long Beach.
I'll be
that's
gone.
right.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gone all next week.
well, you and I aren't gone. I mean, if you're comfortable with us meeting and just discussing it as a committee and sending you a report, we could probably
That's
do
fine.
something on Tuesday. So I can send an email out after today. That was on my mind today, that we normally have our regular solid waste committee meeting on the Monday after this meeting. So I'll send an email out to see if everyone's okay with Tuesday.
And we have to make sure we pick up Alex and we pick up our
Diana.
newest member, Daniel Prelep, who's a forester, so that we have our full contingent, make some decisions.
Yeah, I'll send out an email on that.
Okay.
Hopefully reschedule for Tuesday.
Yeah, and I'll be available by phone unless I'm flying.
Okay. I think we should be okay. I don't think we're making any definitive, because we're not a decision-making body, we recommend to the council.
Sure.
But we can just at least meet and hammer out a couple of details with Clemens, and you could possibly invite a Cut Above to that meeting as well. So I'll send an email after this and we can get everybody together to get it.
Thank you. It'd be useful to know if the Cut Above contacted Blake and what they worked out to
Yeah,
this
and
point.
I don't know that he didn't mention anything to me before he got on his plane, so.
I asked him to follow up if it got to the end of last week before we moved into September.
Right.
But it's Tom at a Cut Above.
Okay.
He's the estimator and he works with the city.
And he's a good dude,
And he's,
very good guy. Dunsmuir friendly.
All right, are there additional committee reports?
well, just one thing, and not to be snarky, but do we have an economic development committee?
Not right now, actually.
So I did have a 2-hour meeting Friday with Laurel Harkness, and Laurel Harkness is a representative of the governor's office, Go Biz, and I gave her my list, just my list. Wireless broadband, the airport, California theater, housing, and she thinks she can connect the city with funding at the state level for all 4 of those things.
Yeah, I'm supposed to meet up with her later this month, so we haven't got a time frame scheduled out, but it's in my email.
She reached out to me about the bus system, so I'm gonna be getting back in touch.
And I put the bus system way down there. And as far as the theater, Tule Lake has a historic theater. And through Laurel, they've got a grant from the EPA to clean up their theater.
Really?
Yes, they do.
Right on.
So we gotta ask, and she has any number of ideas for the airport, for planning grants, for getting a paid expert to do an RFP so we position ourselves for grants. So I don't know why the Economic Development Committee doesn't meet, but I think it'd be really useful moving into 2023 if the committee heads could meet, at least meet with them.
Well, that would also involve pulling together the other players, like Jason Young at the EDC. He's the one looking for grants and all of those.
And she knows them all.
Sweet.
All right, well, let's stick to committees that have met.
Well, the DPAC had an event on Friday. They had it down at the Brewery Garden, and it involved CAL FIRE and everybody else involved in the fire business. There were about 10 different agencies there. Chief Padilla was there. Of course, so the members of DPAC were there. And the big focus, and I think it's something that we should jump on now, is that they really are trying to get the word out about the zone haven and the zones and people being aware of the zones. And we talked about getting involved in doing something like that back in the spring. But I think we need to actually make an effort now to send out a mailing, to everybody that specifically says, know your zone, a picture of the map, so that they understand that if there's a fire and it says this zone is what's being evacuated, they know what's going on.
Can
So
you maybe put it on the water bill?
well, I don't think people look at water bills really. I'm talking about something where they open it up, it's a big flyer, it says it, because this is life and death we're talking about. If people understand when to evacuate and how to evacuate and what messages to listen to, I think that would make a big difference in a crisis. So I'd just like to put that on the agenda to get a mailing out. And I think it's well worth it in terms of the risk we have for fire. The other thing was that DPAC also has come up with a recognition that we have to start worrying about flooding, particularly with what we see in the news, where when you get a big rain, all of a sudden it's a huge rain. And so they're going to dust off what they'd already been working on and bring that back so that we could also have advice from them on what we can do to be better prepared for flooding if that were to happen. So that's the DPAC report.
Thank you. Finance committee, a chance to meet?
No, because Blake's out of town.
We had a field trip then.
All right, any additional committees met?
Well, sure.
All right, then let's move into the approval of the minutes for the August 18th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 18th, 2022.
Second.
Is there any discussion of the minutes?
Well, Wendy invented a new word on page 1. The Amtrak station is being refurbed. And I looked in Wikipedia.
You got me.
No problem.
With that amendment,
Carry on.
All
No.
right. So no further discussion. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Minutes approved. Let's move into the consent
I
agenda.
have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes?
Item D of the consent agenda. Now I'm ready to adopt the consent agenda. However, item D is a resolution of the city council appointing representative to SCORE. We're gonna need that this week. Are we just going to, if I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda, we just assume whoever, mayor, vice mayor, that's who?
No, this is SCORE.
SCORE.
We did the,
So who's our representative?
It's usually Dustin
You're
and
talking about
Blake.
Cal City. You're talking about Cal Cities. Cal Cities we voted on a couple months ago.
That's what I thought we did. but-
Yeah,
this
SCORE
is
is our
SCORE,
insurance.
It's insurance.
So.
Unless you want to
it's
set the
him.
meeting.
It's you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me and
No,
Blake.
I make a motion to adopt the consent.
It's like a
agenda.
4-hour meeting, like once a quarter. And
Oh, you can have.
I heard the
fun.
last one was just riveting.
Yeah. you really-
I missed a good portion of it.
You're lucky.
Blake's actually the vice president of SCORE, so
Oh,
He's really into.
he's really into it.
I
So
know.
he
Good for
backwards
him.
me.
Well, I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
All right, is there a second?
Second?
All right, any discussion? See none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. We have no public hearing tonight, nor old business. So takes us to our lonely item tonight, in new business, item A, REAP, Regional Early Action Planning Grant.
So I realized looking at the agenda, and I apologize if I did this wrong. This is the REAP application for 2 years ago. This is not the REAP 2.0 application, but I can run through it and kind of describe what it is. We have a lot of time on this. I wanted to bring it up as a funding mechanism for the council to discuss some potential projects for the future. It's not due until December. So we can send out the REAP 2.0 guidelines if you're really interested in reading all 43 pages of the technical stuff.
Why don't you just let us know?
Okay. You guys probably don't need to be here. I mean, if you're really interested in
Keep us
housing.
safe.
Hey, welcome.
So the state of California has several housing grants that are available, so none of that matters, Peter.
Well, no, I was worried about the dates, but I see
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
August 31, 2023.
Yeah, so REAP stands for Regional Early Action Program, and in previous cycles, so the 2020 cycle, REAP was the county housing grant program that's similar to our grant that we have right now, which is called LEAP, which is Local Early Action Program. So in 2020 or prior to 2020, we had several different programs that were available to stimulate housing production or streamline housing production application. And so there was Senate Bill 2, there was LEAP, which we have both applied for, that RICO is using to update our housing element, which is due in February of 2023. And then using that as other aspects that we've approved as projects back in 2019, 2020. And so REAP was the county program. So what the state of California has decided to do this round is combine all three pots of money into a REAP 2.0 program. The interesting thing about the REAP 2.0 program is the eligible activities that are available to us. And so the first and foremost, it's accelerating infill housing, and you can do that through a number of projects, and I can read through them if you're super interested. But mainly it's to stimulate housing production or make it easier for people to apply for housing applications for housing development. There is a small pot of money for housing preservation, but they really want to see new units created. And so that's kind of the purpose of the first eligible activities that they have there. So just to name a few, worth noting is affordable housing development programs, which include pre-development costs, which could be land acquisition, environmental, and any type of pre-engineering and design for affordable housing. So it will pay for all of those. The interesting thing with this program is it not only covers low-income housing, it also covers moderate-income housing. So we're not talking about people who are making less than $30,000 a year. For Dunsmuir, I believe we're talking about people who are making less than $50,000 a year. So the program requires us to only set aside 20% of units to those moderate or low income units.
So that would make these projects more more
Financially,
profitable.
yes.
Yeah.
More realistic.
Yeah, so you can do mixed income units, which is fascinating. This is the first time they are offering a program that does mixed unit. They also can be mixed use, so they can have a commercial component to them if you want to do that. Now, I don't know if the Travelers Hotel would qualify as a project. We are early enough in the application NOFA, which is Notice of Finance Availability. It's weird, I've like developed this new like terminology Tourette's where I say an acronym and then I have to say what it means right away because I'm trying to get really good about explaining those things. So I'm not sure if that's an eligible project where we can assist developers with that. So the city can apply on their behalf to do that, but they would have to set a number of units aside that would meet the income threshold. It can be used for rezoning or guiding development by updating planning documents, which include general plan, zoning code amendments, and other specific plans or community plans, as long as there is a housing component to it. We can revamp local planning processes to accelerate infill development for housing supply choice and affordability, completing environmental clearance and cleanup to eliminate the need for project-specific review under CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, establishing and funding affordable housing catalyst funds or housing trust fund. Now, this is a really difficult one because there is a law in California called Article 34 that kind of prevents any new housing funds being available unless we take it to the voters for a 50% plus one vote. So I don't think that's a good option for us moving forward. So for localities to create a affordable housing trust fund, which used to be legal, it was found illegal by citizen ballot measure. And so that would have to be overturned locally to be able to move forward. So it's a statewide thing. We don't have to get into that one. That's probably less of an option for us because that's not going to happen by December. The other thing is performing infrastructure planning and investment in upgrading infrastructure, including but not limited to sewers, water systems, transit, active transportation, roads that do not induce additional vehicle demand, or other public facilities necessary to enable reduction in per capita VMT and accelerate infill development that facilitates housing availability. So VMT is vehicle miles traveled, which is the new metric in California for transportation. So in most of the United States, we have a metric called level of service, which looks at congestion, quality of the road, the design of the road itself, and you're graded from an A to F scale. F being you're in gridlock, it's a completely useless road. A being completely wide open spaces that you can drive whatever you want. So we've moved from a congestion and traffic-based metric to the vehicle miles traveled. And so each community is allocated a per capita vehicle miles traveled. So how many vehicle miles do I need to travel within the city to do certain services? Or could I do those through either an active transportation mode, which thus reduces my vehicle miles traveled? So if we're doing any infrastructure on roads, it would have to have a direct like correlation or nexus with reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled. So it can go to those active transportation type projects. It can't go to a widening project. It can't go to make things faster.
Fix the asphalt.
It has to prove that it's making it more lucrative for people to develop vacant lots or to increase the density of already developed lots by improving that infrastructure.
You know, as you're talking there, the one thing that I keep coming back to, when I met with Jason Young out at the airport, the one thing he came up with pretty quick was the idea of having a community up there of pilots that would be able to have their planes down below and whatever. And so the idea of using that to move the planning, change the zoning on that and put in part of the community up there might be something that would fit right in with this.
So yeah, so that could apply into this. So we could apply for refunding to do a specific plan around the airport to include multiple properties. That would include rezoning, that would include the environmental. So we would do what's called a program environmental impact report, which would basically do all of the environmental and then basically any subsequent development, as long as it fit within the parameters that we set, you do not have to do environmental review. No.
How would this interact with annexation? Or possibly, say we had a project like that that had city lot and then a lot that could be included in the project that's not in Dunsmuir yet? Is there any possibility to?
So the timelines within the grant is that you have to satisfy the deliverables by 2026, which is the other interesting thing about this grant is it's a multi-year grant. So you have to apply by December of 2022. And then basically from there, you have 4 years to get to the deliverable and it has to show housing production. Annexation is not specifically called out as eligible or ineligible, but if we did it, it would have to result in a certain amount of housing units by 2026.
The rationale I was going off of is that in the area of Dunsmuir that's not in the city limits, we actually have greater lot vacancy. There's a lot of acre lots down there. If they're very
Correct.
flat, that with our low density could lead to higher production.
Correct. That theoretically right now could work. I think bringing this up now gives us time to be able to talk to HCD and give them a couple of ideas. So if it doesn't fit within the parameters perfectly, we can go, here is what we're thinking. Is this okay? And we can get the green light from them in writing. It gives us a better chance. So the difference between this grant and the grants we currently hold is that it is competitive. So the ones that we hold for LEAP and SB2 right now were a per capita guarantee. So we just basically applied and it was rolling funds. Now it's competitive, but they have separated out tribal entities and rural entities specifically to have their own pot. So we are not competing with the urban centers. And so right now our region is allocated a little over $2 million. And so I did the math the other day. It makes about $420,000 plus available to Siskiyou County as a whole. Now, what's going to make us competitive over other areas in this $2 million pot area is how close we are to getting our housing element done. So the closer we are to getting that done, because again, if we do not get that done by February, 1, you do not get community development block grant anymore. 2, you are not eligible for these funds. So that is a big hinge, and I haven't heard from Rico yet on where we are with that. And I did send an email to Rico with these grant guidelines asking if he had any idea of what a possible competitive project would be. But the only jurisdiction that's going to get its housing element done before February is Wairika. And so if we are also competitive in getting ours done before February, we have a really, really good chance of being ahead of a lot of other jurisdictions by having those programs already in there. Because if you can point to the programs in your housing element of your general plan, you have a better chance of getting it.
Question? So when we're talking about the housing element, isn't that a major deal, and isn't that a process that has to take time to go through and go to the planning commission and come to the council?
Yep, and it has to go to the California Department of Housing and Community Development for a minimum of 90 days.
So we're getting behind already,
We've
right?
been working on it for
Yeah, Rico's been working on it for a
but
while.
I'm a little, it's interesting that we haven't had an update in years formally.
Yeah, so I did reach out to Rico. I haven't heard back from him at all, so that's probably going to be something we're going to need to follow up on, because that's really a big hinge, not only on this grant, but also our community development block grant.
We did community meetings 3 years ago that I attended. There were maybe about 20 or so people that came there, but I'm just a little concerned he's just doing best practices without consulting with us, or I'd love to know what direction he's going.
We should have him at the next meeting.
It'll be the next meeting. I think
Just an
better for Dustin
update.
to get updated on it and figure it out, but
I did
maybe-
talk to him this week about it a little bit, but as I've been drinking from a fire hose, so
yeah.
just let me circle back around on some public outreach type.
So we
actions related to
we
that.
have satisfied our public outreach requirements for the housing element. You have to do a minimum of 2. We've already done that. But it does have to come back to council for approval in draft form to be transmitted to HCD for the 90-day review.
Yeah, I want to say he mentioned something end of October. or
Yeah.
Oh,
November.
yeah, that'd be
Which
great.
we should be
Yeah.
fine with that. And the big reason why there was a big hiccup in the timelines for housing elements is that the state at the beginning of this calendar year added a new requirement for anyone who hadn't approved theirs yet. So it was a surprise. Congratulations, you've done all this work, you now have to do more, which is the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirement, which is AFFH assessment, which is a monster of a requirement. But anyway, going back to this, The other interesting thing about the eligible activities we also can consider is what's called realizing multimodal communities. So the funds can go towards establishing and implementing a Vision Zero policy and program, a safety plan, and slow streets program. It can develop bike and pedestrian infrastructure plans and other multimodal plans and policies. It can invest in infrastructure projects and other programs to expand active transportation and implement bike and ped plans. Producing multimodal corridors associated with developing specific planning documents or implementation actions. The other big one is shifting travel behavior, which you can do studies for roadway pricing feasibility, funding to establish a local VMT impact fee, funding and implementing parking and transportation demand management programs and ordinances. I know. I thought you'd be very excited. Accelerating housing production near jobs and transit resources. And finally, the more interesting one we've been talking about is increasing transit ridership. It can fund and implement actions to establish more seamless regional transit systems between and across communities, including establishing common fares, sync transit routing systems, scheduling, service design, and wayfinding connect residential neighborhoods with employment centers and other key destinations. Development and implement of multimodal access plans for transit facilities and planning for additional housing near transit stops as uses for creation of planning documents and accompanying environmental and design.
Is that something that the LTC, the Local Transportation Commission, could apply for?
The county would have to apply.
That's what I'm wondering, but the county, is that something the county would be available to?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll
They
keep that in
could.
mind.
Yeah, so again, it's a $2 million plus pot for several counties. Thankfully, we're partnered with counties like Modoc, Butte, and some of the more other rural counties. I think Shasta might be in our county, which might be a big competitor, but they're behind as well on their housing. So I'm not too worried about them. But again, if we were to put in, we're such a small jurisdiction that whatever we put in is going to be around or less than $250,000, which makes us a little bit more competitive because it's going to be more realistic. So for example, our bike ped study that we have right now is I think 170 for that grant. So if we're looking to do $100,000, we could be able to get that. No, we are not going to get a full 2 million. We're probably not going to be $1 million, but again, I think we have some actual things going on that could be really interesting to the grantors for this one. Like I said, this is really unique because they've added the transit portion. The other thing too is I don't remember if Rico's doing a VMT, like a per capita VMT for us. That's the other option we have.
I don't think you mentioned that, but that doesn't mean it's not.
Yeah, so that might be something we look into as well, because that's a requirement for CEQA. And if we don't have our own per capita VMT, we're held to a really, really strict VMT, which means any new development would have to contribute 0 additional miles traveled, which is just unrealistic, but that's just how California works that out. So this is just to bring up right now, we do not have to make any decisions. I wanted to just kind of get a feel for generally what people are looking for, because it is competitive. It's better to start now on the grant process as opposed to waiting to November to put in for December.
When you say the grant process, are you talking about us having identified things we're looking to apply for?
Like actually putting together an application. The other thing too is we can, as a council, decide it's not the right time, we should not put in for this. That is completely on the table. I just thought it was an interesting grant available. I don't know who's going to be applying for it, because a lot of the SB2 and LEAP grant applicants right now have been extended to September of next year because they're not able to meet their deliverables in time due to COVID, staff turnover, things like that. So HCD has really beefed out those timelines. But I think, again, I don't want to pass up something that could be really good. It is a no match grant, so that's the other nice thing about it. And it's for planning documentation. So it's something to think about as a council, take public comment, and possibly discuss maybe a series of a couple ideas to flush out. And I don't mind emailing HCD and going, here's what we're thinking. I think the annexation one is probably the most interesting. I didn't see anything in there kind of pointing towards that. Again, the risk is we have to create housing units.
Matthew, isn't your sister involved in that world?
She is for the county, and exclusively for homeless or people at risk of becoming
Oh,
homeless.
that's right, it's
So
more homeless.
it doesn't, this is, same world, doesn't necessarily overlap as far as the work to be done. But
I think, from a grant, I mean, if we're gonna legitimately, go after this or look at going after it, I think we need to come up with some thoughts and ideas and maybe bring it back to that first meeting in October. Give us about a month to kind of,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I wanted to do, because it is a beefy grant. It can
Yeah.
pay for staffing, it can pay for technical assistance. It's a very wide open field in terms of a granting opportunity, and it's very rare that we get one like this. So I thought it would be
So
good to bring up.
I think
Especially
from a
in
thought
that-
process standpoint, I'm thinking we need to just figure out our focus. We're gonna focus on housing, we're gonna focus on transportation type planning options or what, and then, so if we have a list and we just sit here and we prioritize it out, and then we're like, okay, this seems like the best, most reasonable direction, then we can go after that.
I have a
'Cause
question.
I probably have 3 different ideas, but they're not all interconnected or related. They would all fit within the grant, but they're not interrelated. I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a couple comments on that. One, just to remind everyone, we're over a year, maybe a year and a half out on our economic development planning grant. It's supposed to be $250,000.
Yeah.
The status of that will maybe help us see where we could put it. It's a CDBG grant. Blake knows some parts about it. I think probably reach out directly to Todd, who's kind of in his wheelhouse and his initial project. We don't know where we're at with that. Between that and the active transportation, we've kind of taken care of a lot of major things, but I have some concerns about going after housing planning grants, merely because, I work in the real estate industry. The economics of building just aren't there in the free market. And local government's not necessarily what's holding it up. It's just the cost of materials, the cost of labor. So I don't know, I mean, as much as I'm all for actually creating new housing, I do have some skepticism that all this effort towards the planning is gonna be realized.
Good point. That's a
But
good
I'm
point.
not totally
Yeah.
against the idea, but
Yeah, the other big thing too is if we're doing a planning document, you have to make housing, especially multi-unit or mixed unit housing, a use by right. And so use by right basically means that they come in, all they have to do is get a building permit, and that's it.
I like that.
So we can do something like that. So if we did happen to do a specific plan, which included the airport property, which got some development pieces there and included properties outside with the purpose of annexation, you would basically have to do some kind of document that goes, okay, we're going to rezone this, medium high density, and then basically make that all by right. So they don't have to do any additional permitting through the planning department. They can actually just come, and it's what we call shovel-ready site. And basically then we can put that up and say, we have this shovel ready, the environmental's done. And, going through the process of Wairika's housing element, we had 3 people show up to one of our meetings and go, I don't care how much it costs as long as I don't have to go through review. So it is lucrative to a lot of housing developers. So if you take a look at the Danco company is coming back to Mount Shasta to try and rejuvenate that project, the biggest issue they're having with it is they are gonna have to have a really beefed up CEQA because of Mount Shasta. So if we were to have something by right, ready to go, shovel ready, CEQA's done, it's easy for us to approach big, what we call master developers who can do a 50 unit plus, like RCHC, No Place Like Home. You can approach Danco, you can approach several other companies and go, we've got this ready to go. Would you like to enter into an agreement? That being said, the city can also use it to purchase land for this type of use as well.
Of course, we own the land up at the airport, so that's a good sign
Correct.
there.
You could theoretically annex and add land to that, because again, having a city being the land holder, it's one, you can approach it from an economic standpoint and lease the land for housing, and you could make money off of the market rate units as a city, or you can sell the land at a highly reduced price for the purpose of low-income housing.
Were the city purchased a piece of property adjacent to the city that surrounded the city, would it kind of by right become part of the city?
No, you would still have to
You have to go
annex.
through the process.
Still have that.
But it's not out of the question, and again, this is a 4 or 5 year grant. So if we do need to do something like that, it's something we could ask about right now, is if annexation is on the table.
I guess, the other thought I had on this was just, and I'm not necessarily an expert in this, but I was really on some info and sure Dustin have thoughts on it too, and to review where California is operating feds, but what puts us in the best position to get other no-match grants for actually doing this? Because this is really just getting us ready to get other grants.
Doing by right zoning, because right now, California just released their super NOFA, so their super notice of funding availability, which is 5 separate grants in one announcement. One is for farm workers, one is for veteran housing, one is for multi-unit mixed income housing, one is for transitional supportive housing, and I can't remember the 5th one because it was just so obscure. It didn't like fit in Siskiyou County, so I just didn't even read it. So yeah, actually, I mean, right now, what was the last news? We're sitting on like a $29 billion surplus. Oh, sorry, 80. We're sitting on an $80 billion surplus or something like that. And so if you look at what the priorities of the state are, it's housing. They're going to keep throwing money at housing. And so for Wairika, we talked about this at their meeting this week, so it's not a secret. We're going to be applying for the REAP 2.0 to do a comprehensive zoning code update because they haven't updated their zoning code since the 80s. And that's going to pay for the zoning code and a programmatic EIR for the general planning and zoning code update. So that's what I'm going for them. I don't know if that's what we need. I don't know if our zoning code is really that restrictive in terms of density. Rico's talked about it before. We're one of the densest in Siskiyou County. It's just the fact that we don't have a lot of vacant land for new development.
I think the economics of this would stop it, because our zoning, do whatever we want to, change it any which way we want, and it doesn't change the reality of what's being built. Our zoning is not what's getting in the way of building. Is there any way to, I know you discussed in prior meetings, like a form-based zoning?
You can do, yeah, we could do a comprehensive zoning code update. So there's several different types of zonings available to cities. There's what we have right now, which is called Euclidean zoning, which is very structured, like this use goes here. Kind of, yeah, this use goes here, this use goes here. It's very standard. There's also performance-based zoning where you can design your zoning code to respond for the type of property that's available. There's form-based code, which is basically more focused on how things look rather than what the uses are. You still do have a pool of uses, but you have a much more flexible code in terms of how it looks as long as it meets certain objective criteria. That's another thing too, is we do not have a objective design ordinance under Senate Bill 35, which is required, which is a objective design standard for multi-unit housing. So it could go to that as well, which basically is, again, by right, avoid CEQA, and basically it's if you choose to develop it and you make it look like this, which it's a yes, no, that's what objective is does it meet this or does it not? Then they basically come in and just get a building permit. They don't have to go through a CUP, conditional use permit. You don't have to go through any additional permitting through that. So there are, the problem with Siskiyou County jurisdictions is there are so many opportunities that like it's endless, and that's why it's really hard to pick one. So it's fun. This is like what I live on.
It's always interesting when we watch you spill all your knowledge out in this area.
It's so much fun. But anyway, yeah, it's really cool. I think there's a really good chance that we can get it if we're realistic about what we're asking for. Like I said, a comprehensive zoning code update I'm working on. I have a contractor that assists me in Wairika. I mean, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for that to cost $200,000. But if we go in, and we're smaller in scale, Wairika is much larger, spatially and population-wise, we're very condensed, which gives us a good opportunity for that, to go out for that type of grant without spending a ton of money. And then with everybody with COVID, like we can do all of our public stuff via Zoom. So our consultants who used to come up here, and that was usually the largest cost, is travel, don't have to do that anymore. So that's a good thing about it. But anyway.
You know, there is one
real huge opportunity that exists in the city that we never really talk about. It's the stepsister, if you will, of the theater, hotel. You know, that's something that we should keep at least in the back of our minds, that there's an opportunity for housing. Wrapped up in the same conundrum as other.
Yeah, but that's not really a planning.
No, I just had to spit it out because I was.
Yeah, I totally agree that the low-hanging fruit is all the empty units offline currently in Dunsmuir, but the state doesn't seem to incentivize that.
I mean, it is mentioned as an eligible activity, but I don't think it would score as well. We would have to prove a really, really strong nexus. So we would have to get our vacancy numbers, and we would have to get how many units are not being used because they're dilapidated versus units not being used because they're recreational seasonal owners. So that's like the hard thing with preserving or getting people into those. Other cities that I've seen use like Leap and Reap that could qualify for this is they went through and they did pre-made, ready to go engineered plans for different housing types, so that you don't have to go get an engineer to do it. They just give you a stock, like, do you want to build an ADU? Like, what does that look like? Do you want to build a duplex, a triplex, or a quad? And they will do a basic engineered plan that's completely stamped on behalf of the city. So all you have to do is basically say, okay, this is already done. You don't have to pay an engineer, it's ready to go. You buy the property, come use this, and here's how much it's going to cost for building permits, because you already have the square footage and faucets all done, so people know exactly how much it's going to cost, and then you don't have to pay, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering fees.
Just for the ground.
Yeah, and so that there are certain programs like that that have been going through. You know, it just really kind of depends on what the need is, but that's mainly housing focused. But again, they do have that small transit and transportation aspect as well. So that's another option.
Thank you. Any additional questions? That's communication.
You mean Arth?
I don't know. I have comments, but no questions.
Well, it's informational, but we want to do a public comment?
You can, yeah, if anyone would like to come up and comment on this, please come to the podium or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. See none, I'll close public comment.
So I want us all to recognize that this item would never be on our agenda but for the initiative of one member of the city council. That is, for the time I've been in Dunsmuir, this is mostly for your benefit, Dustin, it simply has not been in the bandwidth for the city council and the staff to apply for grant funds. For all the grant opportunities made available by the federal government and the state government, if it's not a coalition that starts in Wairika, typically we just take a pass. And the notion that we're not going to do planning until we get this grant that we've been waiting a year and a half for, I think badly deserves our community. My talk with Laurel Harkness, she said exactly the same thing that Councilmember Lucchese said. The state has a huge budget surplus, and the state is focused on rural counties getting left behind. Housing, especially the Central Valley, broadband, anything that encourages economic development. There are any number of programs that are willing to fund a community that asks for help. So the stage thing that Councilmember Deutsch has worked on, why wouldn't we make a grant application for exactly what you want for transportation needs in the city of Dunsmuir? I can count 5 buildings in Dunsmuir with over 50 units of housing that are shut down and serving nobody. And maybe some of the owners don't want to work with the city and accept grant money to turn their buildings into productive housing, but I'll bet the House of Glass does. I'll bet there's several motel owners that do, but we don't ask. So it puts a huge burden on you as the new city manager, but I would love to be part of the planning sessions, because once I'm off this council next year, I'm going after veteran housing. I want to house veterans in rehabilitated housing in the city of Dunsmuir. And we're going to get it done, but we have to plan for it. Everything from CEQA to front money to finish money. Is the city going to own it? Is a nonprofit going to own it? It's something we can do, but it will be turning a whole new page for the little city of Dunsmuir. We don't vision, we don't plan, we don't prioritize, but with this kind of initiative, we can. And I think we will be successful, especially with the help from Laurel and others, in getting someone else's money to do it. So I'm extremely grateful for the initiative, and I hope we take advantage of it. But it does put a huge burden on, you got an empty file with nothing. We don't have anything that is forward-looking for 2, 3, or 5 years, and that has been costed out, and that has the cooperation of the people that need to cooperate. But any baby step in that regard, I just hope the next council and you try to realize the help the state's trying to give us. Thank you.
Question?
Well, real quick, Councilman North, do you have any specific thoughts on areas you'd like us to look into, like staff to look into? For this particular
Just
grant?
talk, this is why I would like you and Bruce to meet with Laurel, because when I say airport, she says dit. When I say housing, she says dit. 3 programs, 2 programs.
I plan on reaching out to her better with email, so.
Yeah.
The question I have is it legal to pay somebody to write your grants?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hire grant
We
writers.
hire grant writers. We do it all the
But
time.
I mean, and then base it upon the grant being written, or do you just hire somebody?
You can do both. You can have them write it, and you can also have somebody who administers it as well.
But the answer is
Pace
no,
does
you
that.
can't do it on a bounty hunter basis. You get 10%.
Right.
Well, so Pace Engineering does that for us. So Pace Engineering takes the liability of not getting the grant. We do pay them to then help administer parts of those things. But in terms of housing, yes, housing specifically, there are a lot of people out there who will even take the liability of not getting a grant. There's a couple of different entities that can do that. You would have to put out an RFP, but you can find those
So
people.
would it be useful for us to hire somebody to go for grants? And
Yes.
is there-
I think in the future, it could be something we talk about and look at capacity to be able to do that. So typically you wouldn't go out for a grant writer because they wouldn't take the liability of doing the reporting to doing the
Yeah,
administration.
they're happy to write it for you for a fee.
I think the challenge we have is when it comes to the match side. We gotta think about the finances. This is a no match, so that's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that 10 or 20%, I was just looking at some related to the airport. Might be a 10% match on our part. We got to commit to some of that. It does put a crunch on the finances. So, but I think if I could comment on what I think priority should be, is I think we need, if we're gonna do it, we got to make it the easiest path for somebody to come in here, and whether they're going to rehabilitate housing that's not in use or build new housing, I think we have to make that path as easy as possible. So whatever we apply for in the grant, like you mentioned, building multi-unit housing right by the airport, then we need to make it shovel ready, because I think we just have to make it, if that's their hang up, if that's what the developers are saying their hang up is, and we can get past that hurdle because we're the city, then maybe this is what we should focus on, because it's going to get us the best chance for making the housing happen. Because it's not just about the planning side of it, it's how do we get to the end goal, which is new housing.
When is the next LTC meeting?
Second Tuesday,
So it'll be next week, or no, 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now.
Because that would be, going back to Councilmember Arth's point about transit, okay, everybody kind of knows my feelings about this. I don't really have a lot of faith in the county for putting in for this, especially for transit. So that might be something as a representative to hopefully ask and maybe put on the agenda to see if they would apply for the REAP 2.0 grant for
definitely push that.
transit. And if they say no, I
Could
think
we do?
that might be an option for us to put in right now.
Well, the whole idea of the ultimate solution here is a system that also, besides what happens inside of Dunsmuir, happens, between the other cities and et cetera. So from that standpoint, we could buy ourselves a unit and drive it around, but if it's not going to be able to get us to Mount Shasta or to Weed or whatever, it's still a problem. So I do firmly believe that the LTC is in a different mode right now. I mean, we've been given direction to come up with an RFP to do the planning. And as I see it right now, I'm looking at it as having two different modalities. One of them is coming up with the plan and the RFP and what would it look like and how many buses would it take and how many hours. And then a whole separate move on how do we come up with all the grants that could fit into an interlocking plan that would cover all the costs. So that's where I'll bring that up. In fact, if you want to send me I've got it here in the.
No, I gotta send you the updated one. The one in the packet is the old
Okay,
one.
if you want to send that to me, then I could reach out to Jeff Schwein and get him to include that. If we don't get it this one, then maybe the next one, but your timing is good then because we have to get it in by December, so, right? Okay, I'll follow up on that.
Could we have some, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager, could we have some sort of a informal planning session in the very near future for those who are interested in taking advantage of the grant opportunity?
Informal as in,
Well, if we say yes, Mr. City Manager, we want you to do this, that's kind of the exploding cigar. He's got nothing to work with.
well, I think we're beginning the process here, informally discussing
But
what the options are.
I would like to put in applications for this cycle. Even if they get denied, it's an exercise as a city.
I think what we're trying to do here, Councilman Arth, is limit it down to one particular project. Is that
Why?
correct?
Well, no, you don't have to limit it to one right now. I think it was just to put it out there. One, see if we're interested in applying. Two, what types of programs are we looking at? If we can narrow it down to, 3 or 4 that you can kind of ballpark a little bit and see what's realistic.
What about housing at the airport?
Well, that's kind of what Matthew brought up, is potentially a specific plan that's a development plan that could cover both infrastructure, zoning.
Yeah, and there's the 200-acre parcel to the north of it that's interested in this.
See, all we ever do is talk about it because we don't have the capacity to actually reduce it to a grant
Well,
application.
I think you had mentioned 3 or 4 different applications. The challenge is we have to manage those, and I think the bandwidth from what I've seen is I can handle one. So let's make it a good one so we can push it all the way through to the end.
I think it's
That's
got to
kind of my
focus
thought.
on housing.
Well, and we've had good preliminary conversations on this. What are we looking for at the, say, October 1st meeting?
So I mean, just jotting down notes. I mean, I can dip into my network and see what we can do. There is an entity that will apply for housing grants on behalf of cities and manage those grants specifically just for housing.
And managing them?
Yep, they will do that. So we would have to put out an RFP in the next 30 days, but I mean, it might be worth taking a look at possibly, again, this was just to gauge interest. Obviously, there's a lot of interest.
Yep.
So I think from today, I mean, it gives me at least an ability to reach out to Dustin and see what we can do. I can reach out to a couple network people.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't mind writing a grant either. I mean, that was kind of where I'm at headwise, is I have to write one for Wairika. It's gonna be a completely different project, but I understand the guidelines. And so if this is something I can also go, hey, we're gonna do Wairika and Dunsmuir. This is what Dunsmuir's thinking of. What are the odds of that? If HCD comes back and goes, no, that's not a good project, I would come back to council and say, they said it was not a good project. Or I threw these 3 ideas out to them. This is the idea that HCD is very attracted to. I've been doing that with HCD, with Wairika recently about a couple of different ideas. So I think this was just to gauge our interest and then get 3 to 4 ideas to throw out to them and go, any of these look like they could be competitive in comparison to what everybody else is putting out.
I love the idea of bringing infrastructure up towards the airport.
Well, and I'm sort of in the same boat. I have written my fair share of grants. Nobody loves to do it, but they're getting easier and easier. So I've already told Laurel Harkness, next year, I will be writing the grant to submit to the city for submission through the city to the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Housing, to get going on all of these shut-in, decaying housing units that are just sitting in our community, not serving anybody. I'll do it. And I think we'll be successful because the services that veterans get in Siskiyou County is terrible. Ask any of them.
Are there any closing thoughts or comments on the grant?
Well, it's just what the go forward looks like.
I think it's, I'll flush a couple things together and send them over to you and see what you think. I think we could get away with doing a specific plan around the airport property and potential. Annexation is going to be the interesting one. I don't know if they're going to go, we don't want to touch that, or they're going to go, that's kind of an interesting project, let's go with it. People like novelty, and so if we can sell that aspect, but I think it's a good point because there is a defunct well up there that needs a little bit more environmental testing. Theoretically, this could pay for that, as well as if it is defunct, we could pay for potential cleanup of that to be able to use as a water source.
It was in great shape. They couldn't even get any readings. The water was so pure, so.
That's been a number of years. I know prior to Todd leaving, there is one of our pilots is an environmental consultant, and he was offering to test it himself, and then COVID happened, so that kind of got put on the back burner.
Okay.
So that could potentially be part of that, is paying for the formal, evaluation, because if we were to get a well out of that.
Is that connected with the property we're trying to purchase?
No, it's
Whatever happened with that?
It's on the airport property, and it was a previous Forest Service well that they abandoned as part of the property.
No,
We're trying to get a hold of the old, or the Caltrans as well.
that's the one I was talking about, the Caltrans
On the
one.
other land. We've never got an update on that.
Okay, I'll have to look into it, because my understanding there was also a Forest Service well that was abandoned and brought out of commission, and that was the one that we were gonna test.
Doesn't ring true for me. I know that we were supposedly waiting for Ed Valenzuela to work, or the county to work through the process. It was coming from either the Forest Service or Caltrans, but the property there was being handed over, and we were lined up through Ed. He was supposedly waiting for it to happen, so maybe we can poke him.
If it's able to put housing on it, we could theoretically acquire it.
I'd also talk to Tracy Smith, regional real estate person from Forest Service. There's a couple of parcels she'd love to give back to the city,
We can
including
purchase
one
that.
that's part of our, adjacent to our sewer, the wastewater treatment plant, and then one that's up there.
I don't know if this could pay for it. You don't normally want to put housing next to a water treatment plant.
There's some exemptions in giving land to other government.
Anyway,
Keep talking like a planner.
well, do you want to live next to a pool plant? Do you?
Orange County, they recycle.
Anyway, thank you. This is enough for.
All right, let's move into future agenda items. We had mentioned some.
I do want to line us up on the hotspot.
Yeah, let's do that the meeting after this next one. I will not be attending this upcoming meeting in person either. And then when Blake returns, we will dive into the audit and hopefully the future budget.
Yes.
If we need more time to work out accurate projections on the budget, that's fine.
I believe we're waiting for the chamber to come back with their community promotions application.
It should be at the next one, I believe.
Okay.
And then in October, Parks and Rec is due to come back and present their plan to correct the deficiencies in their lease. It can be put off perhaps till later October or early November, but that's on the horizon as well. But I do say that we should stick to relatively light agendas for the city managers, taking in more information per day than most of us do.
We do have that one, that other grant that we were talking about that's coming back on the next council, I believe, the 15th. Do we have that on there?
I think that was this one.
Was that this one? I thought there was like key.
Oh, no, there's
Oh, the
PH.
PLHA.
Yeah, that needs to be on the next one,
Yeah.
or we
Yeah.
won't get it.
With regards to the hotspot thing, I think, Justin, we want to have Matthew and I and you meet, probably we would call him live so that he can meet the people and get to know what's going on.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing, but it's not pressing compared to, we've done the
Oh, I
legwork, so
agree.
we want to bring it to council, but you're not gonna be able to make a decision until you have good context on Dunsmuir's finances. So when you're ready to review that.
Can we do that one in well, I'm, just because we're gonna all be
Oh,
going
yeah,
next
I agree.
week.
October
and
1st would be fine.
the first one in October, that's the 6th, so that gives us a little time to.
I'm just saying before that, we'd want to have a Zoom or they do team,
Yeah.
Microsoft team meeting,
Okay.
just meet them
That's
and
fine.
go over it. But
Okay.
yeah, that's fine in terms of that.
I want to put something on the agenda, but before I do, I would like to ask my fellow council members, if you guys would do me a favor, if you guys would, it's called Bush Street, it's a set of stairs. It goes from down here to up there. I would like you guys, whenever you get a chance, to walk those stairs, and then we'll have a discussion at the next meeting. If you guys would do that for me, you'll understand why I stress this.
Well,
It's
can
a
you,
very big liability.
could you talk to staff first and?
I already have, and I warned them that I was asking you guys to look at this, and then just go look at it, and then we'll talk about it in the next meeting. I need our opinions. Okay?
Thank you for bringing it to their attention.
It's a safety net.
Potential.
I appreciate you guys working with me on
Say
this.
potential.
Potential.
Okay.
All right, nothing further. I will
Make a motion to
entertain.
adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so adjourned.
That was an hard one.
Sorry for being late.
It was predicted.
And then the water and everything.
Oh, no, yeah, I was just gonna be a little late. I just.
Does it look like fun?
Hey, Wendy, you know anybody who's good at grants, running grants?
Wendy.
No, it's her partner.
Oh, yeah. Allison's great.
Allison, yeah.
Are you Mike? Hi, Dustin. Nice to finally physically meet you. No, I was there, and my kids were there.
Bye, everybody.
The food lines got too long for them to, so we ended up going somewhere else.